After 2 years of Gerald Ford as president, the 1976 election pitted Democratic candidate Jimmy Carter versus the incumbent Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford had been sworn into office following Richard Nixon's resignation from the presidency of the United States in 1974. Ford is best known for immediately pardoning or forgiving the potential crimes of Richard Nixon. Due to this pardon, Nixon never faced charges due to his involvement in Watergate. This was incredibly unpopular with the majority of the American people because they wanted an investigation into the Watergate scandal, as they believed that, once again, political elites were getting away with crimes that everyday Americans wouldn't. Due to this, Ford had little to no chance of winning the election. It is believed that the Democrats could have put up anyone against Ford, and that Democratic candidate would have won. Essentially, the Democratic Party did just that when they placed a relatively unknown peanut farmer and ex-governor of Georgia named Jimmy Carter up against him. Carter easily won the election, and the Carter years in America had begun.
Carter brought his down-to-earth Southern style to the presidency by holding Roosevelt-style fireside chats on radio and television. Although he had a great sense of charm and likability, he was never able to reach out to Congress, even in his own party, making it impossible to get his agenda passed. Both parties in Congress joined together to sink his budget proposals, as well as his tax and welfare reform programs. Once in office, Carter focused most of his time on the worldwide energy crisis. Carter used his fireside chats as a platform to encourage the American people to conserve oil and gas. In addition to this, he presented Congress with over 100 proposals on energy conservation. Out of this battle, Congress approved the National Energy Act, which placed a higher tax on gas-guzzling automobiles, as well as removing price controls on oil and natural gas produced in the United States. The National Energy Act didn't do much, but it did slightly ease American dependence on foreign oil by 1979. Unfortunately, in the summer of 1979, renewed violence in the Middle East, combined with the decision of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, also known as OPEC, to announce another major price hike, caused the price of oil to skyrocket. During these oil shortages, it was common for cars to wait in lines around the block to get gas, and for gas stations to run out of gas. Cars were given stickers, and gas was rationed so that drivers would get gas on certain days of the week. This energy crisis crippled many Americans who couldn't afford these high gas prices.
The issue with energy, combined with other factors, caused the United States to fall into an economic crisis. Inflation in the United States rose from 7.6% to 11.3%, and the unemployment rate hovered above 6%. This caused Americans to have less disposable income, creating a stagnated economy. In an attempt to fix the issues of the economy, Carter tried many different methods to spark the economy, none of which worked. In an act of desperation, Carter gave a fireside chat speech that became known as his Malaise Speech. Carter complained that Americans had a crisis of spirit and lectured Americans on conservation and a way in which they should lead their lives. Americans felt as though their president was out of touch and felt like he was talking down to them. All of this caused Americans to lose confidence in Carter's policies and leadership as president.
When people look back at the Nixon presidency, they saw a paranoid man tangled in scandal. While that is true, Nixon did have great success in foreign policy negotiations with communist nations. This cooling of tensions was called détente. When Carter took office, he placed less of an emphasis on détente and focused more on the human rights violations being committed by the communist superpowers. This led to a breakdown in relations between the United States and the nations of China and the Soviet Union. Additionally,
Carter took issue with the way in which the Soviet Union treated its political dissidents, which delayed negotiations on SALT II. SALT II was meant to be an extension of SALT, negotiated by Richard Nixon and Leonid Brezhnev. Eventually, Carter and Brezhnev met and signed the treaty. However, due to its failure to reduce the number of armaments that each nation was allowed to have, SALT II was heavily criticized by the Senate. Then, in December of 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, causing Carter to end his fight for the treaty in the Senate, causing it never to be ratified. With all the long gas lines and inflating energy costs, Americans became very aware of the Middle East. Due to all of the conflict in the region, Carter achieved one of his greatest accomplishments. In 1977, Carter was able to seize an opportunity to help negotiate a peace between Egypt and Israel, two nations of extremely different belief systems. Carter invited Anwar el-Sadat of Egypt and Menachem Begin of Israel to his retreat at Camp David. Over 12 days, Carter was able to mediate an agreement between the two. In the negotiations, Israel agreed to remove themselves from the Sinai Peninsula, which it had seized from Egypt in 1967, and Egypt agreed to recognize Israel's right to exist as a nation. The Camp David Accords would be one of the positive notes of Carter's presidency.
One of the biggest blemishes on Carter's record comes with the events that occurred in Iran. In the late 1970s, the Shah of Iran, or the leader of Iran that was placed into power by the CIA during the Eisenhower administration, was entrenched in political scandal, and the Iranian people were sick of the corruption and authoritarian tactics of the regime. Led by the Ayatollah Khomeini, the Shah was deposed, and Iran set up a religious state that followed the teachings of the Quran, or the sacred book of Islam. Despite this, the United States still supported the Shah, and when he fell ill, Carter allowed him to come to the United States for cancer treatment. As a method of protest, and in order to remove itself from the corrupt influence of the West, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American hostages. The students demanded that the United States send the Shah back to Iran to face criminal prosecution in exchange for the U.S. hostages. Carter refused to send the Shah back, and there was an intense standoff that lasted over a year. The hostages would finally be released on January 20th, 1981, shortly after Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president. The Iranians intentionally held the hostages until Carter had left office to embarrass him, and as punishment for refusing to return the Shah to Iran.
Jimmy Carter was never truly able to get a grip on the politics of being president. He wasn't able to get Congress to help him get his agenda passed. Due to this, he lost the confidence of the American people. Carter also caused the United States to take a step back on the world stage due to the collapse of Detente with China and the Soviet Union. With Carter's lack of leadership for the Democratic Party, he left the door open for the next great conservative leader to take control of the United States.